Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. Now, remember, with the recent technology transfers that are proposed to happen within India, there's one big thing that India needs to focus on is on manufacturing. How do we make the technology that is going to come at us from various different locations? We now know that the French are also interested to talk about the Safran engines. The Rolls Royce, it seems, are talking about some further engine technology. There's some talks about some submarine technology. There was a deal signed with the Spanish just a while ago with regards to some submarines that needs to be built within India. So there's a lot which is happening in terms of manufacturing, in terms of technology, and in terms of this entire gambit of defense, the defense sector. We need to still understand how this technology needs to be imbibed within the country and developed further. For that, I have with me someone really special who has his eye on the technological and manufacturing aspects of it. Lieutenant General Agarwal, sir, thank you so much for joining me. Your insights would be really helpful for us to understand how to take India into the next level of defense manufacturing. And as a matter of fact, I would rather also add that to come into a point of civil military fusion and manufacturing thereof. So, firstly, thank you so much for joining me, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you for having me on the show. And Jai Hind to all our viewers.
So, first question I'd like to ask you is, there is a lot of technology which is going to just sweep into the country now. Uh, there is a challenge, of course, with regards to imbibing that. There is a challenge with regards to ensuring that there is a certain setup which is done and it is done correctly. How do you kind of, first of all, what are the steps that you'd like to see happening with regards to getting the technology in right, and of course building up a certain amount of R&D on that technology for our own domestic use?
Thank you, Adi. Before I talk about the technology and the requisite research and development required, let me just cover a little bit of background on defense manufacturing. The focus started, right from the Make in India initiative, which was launched on 25th September 2014, while further impetus was given by the Atmanirbhar Bharat policy, which was unveiled on 12th May 2020. Now, in both these programs, defense manufacturing occupies major space. While the overall objective of the Government of India is to increase the share of manufacturing in the GDP to 25% by 2025 by focusing on 25 different sectors, including defense. The attention is undoubtedly on defense due to the sheer size of defense imports every year. As per the latest SIPRI report, India accounted for 11% of the total global arms imports between 2018 to 2022, even though the share of expenditure on defense procurement through imports has reduced from 46% to almost 36% now. In the 2022-23 budget, objective of 68% of capital procurement for defense from indigenous manufacturers was spelt out, which is supposed to be further enhanced to 75% as per the Honorable Raksha Mantri speaking in GIS conclave in Lucknow recently. Now, clearly, such policy announcements open up massive opportunities for the defense manufacturing sector. Coming to the technologies involved, in defense manufacturing, we are aware that the weapon systems and platforms required and procured by the defense forces have always been based on the prevailing cutting edge technologies. In fact, a convergence of top notch technologies. Thus, a fighter aircraft employs state of the art aeronautical engineering, jet engine technology, avionics, sensors, fly by wire technology, precision guided munitions, surveillance, electronic warfare technologies, and much more. Similarly, an armored fighting vehicle or a tank is a system of systems integrating mechanical engineering, that is power pack, armament technology, the fire control system, sighting system, gun control system, communication system, NVC protection, etc. Now, in all such weapon systems or platforms, prowess in metallurgy, rubber technology, control systems, etc., is a must. It is difficult, if not well nigh impossible, for a single manufacturer or entity to have all the capabilities required for producing or integrating a particular defense equipment. And perforce, that manufacturer has to collaborate with many other entities. For example, the Sukhoi 30 Mark 1 aircraft manufactured by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited under license has systems and components supplied by 14 manufacturers in 6 nations. In fact, I would say that it is not an overstatement that the gamut of defense equipment encompasses the whole range of technologies which mankind has invented and more. Thus, the enormity of the task of being Atmanirbhar or self reliant in manufacture of defense equipment for a country like India should not be lost in the grandeur of policy statements. In fact, if the nation can move up from the estimated self reliance level of 25 to 30% as of now to a figure of 75 to 80%, the goal of Atmanirbharta should be considered as achieved. The challenge is indeed daunting for a nation whose traditional strength is not manufacturing and can only be tackled by steady acquisition of incremental defense manufacturing capabilities. How this Make in India and indigenous defense manufacturing can be facilitated and speeded up is something worth examining. One critical factor in development of new technologies and their employment in design and manufacture of defense equipment is the investment in research and development. Now, in terms of percentage of the GDP, India's spending on R&D is estimated to be amongst the lowest in the world. In 2022, India spent just 0.65% of GDP on research and development, which is lower than what the BRICS nations spent and much lower than the world average of about 1.8%. Countries like United States and China reportedly spend about 2.8% to 3% of their GDP on defense R&D. Israel, a major exporter of defense technologies, spends almost 6% of GDP on research and development. China is continuously increasing its research and development, and it is expected that its R&D investments will surpass the United States by 2026. If we account for the fact that the GDP of US and China is 6 to 8 times higher, one can comprehend the enormity of asymmetry in the spend on defense R&D. The number of scientific papers published in international journals and the innovation infrastructure thus created due to focus on R&D leads to development of new technologies. An indicator of its success is also the number of patents granted. It is here that the asymmetry gets further skewed, as India has a minuscule number of patents granted over the years, less than 1% of these countries mentioned. The corollary is that increase in R&D budget is an indispensable component of the strategy which is required to be put in place. Now, overall, if we can spend about 2% of GDP on R&D, it will be a big boost to our quest of being Atmanirbhar. However, the reality is that today the whole defense budget has got compressed to just about 2% of GDP. Thus, to achieve the indigenous manufacturing targets, there is no option but to look towards private sector R&D and manufacturing, as well as foreign investments and collaborations. A welcome development announced recently by the government is the setting up of a national research foundation with a corpus of rupees 50,000 crore for R&D over 5 years. The bill is to be introduced in the forthcoming session of Parliament, and hopefully it will foster a culture of R&D in universities, colleges, research institutions, and R&D labs. Thank you.
So the interesting thing that you've spoken about is obviously the involvement of the private sector. That is something that I think everybody is looking at quite hard. And I did mention that L&T is, working with some Spanish organizations to build up submarines and stuff like that. Now,
Yes.
private sector works on profits. You can't subsidize it by the government. It's not China at the end of it. It's an open market. How do you kind of ensure that these private sector organizations have profit? What are the incentives you can give? Any promotions you can give? And of course, what is the role of ensuring that the private sector can only make money when it actually gets a certain amount of orders at the right time?
Yes.
So how do you kind of fix this civil military fusion that would, as a problem that would come across when you're trying to diversify into the private sector, sir?
Yeah, Adi, you have brought it out very correctly and touched a very pertinent point. See, the private sector has to keep the profit motive in its sights. It is they're not here for charity. And defense, manufacturing and R&D requires deep pockets and hand holding, because the private sector is not assured of any orders. Hence, there is a need of providing them incentives for manufacturing in the defense industry. Now, defense manufacturing not being a function of only national economic resource allocation, that is R&D budget, the defense manufacturing is also linked to a sound industrial base which is there in the country. Now, this industrial base, yes, it can be in public sector or can be developed in the private sector or in a combination of public private sector on a partnership model. Now, it also requires defense manufacturing also requires skilled human resources, that is engineers, scientists, technicians, along with academia to impart the requisite technical skills. It also requires suitable civil and technical infrastructure and an integrated ecosystem for defense manufacturing to flourish. Even after all this is in place, it takes years many years, if not decades, for R&D to succeed, prototypes to be made and tested, and a manufacturing line to be set up with all the supply chains.
Hmm.
Thus, the cost of achieving self-reliance can be exorbitant and may have time penalties also. Thus, private sector has to be incentivized to take up defense projects and to facilitate indigenous manufacture. There has to be, like I said, hand-holding of innovators and system integrators, ideally a public-private partnership model, where part funding of private sector is enabled. The culture between the public sector and the private sector has to be that of collaboration and not competition. Only then the defense projects can be successfully progressed. Now, as far as foreign direct investment is concerned, the government has been steadily increasing the foreign investment limits, FDI limits, in the defense sector, which is presently at 74% through the automatic route and 100% via the government route. Now, this has been done to make the Indian defense industry an attractive investment destination. The foreign OEMs can avail cost advantages of manufacturing in India and export to other countries in the region. Since technology infusion requires industry to collaborate with the foreign OEMs, Indian and foreign OEMs should set up joint ventures
Hmm.
and special purpose vehicles, which include both manufacturing and an R&D element. Government has also started a production linked incentive scheme, that is PLI, in short PLI, to boost domestic manufacturing and cut down on import bills. Now, via this PLI, the government gives incentives to companies for incremental sales from products made in domestic units. At present, the scheme targets labor intensive sectors, with drone and drone component sector being the only sector amongst 14 sectors with a semblance of defense connect. As the government plans to add more sectors to the PLI scheme, it will be worthwhile to consider PLI in a few carefully chosen defense manufacturing sectors also, say assemblies and modules which are being imported today. It will incentivize foreign investments and collaboration also. Yeah,
See, the deal is, you've brought in foreign investments. Fair enough. That is something which is going to be interesting, and that's required at the end of it,
yeah,
to have a larger ecosystem going, sir. But one of the things that India would also need to access is the international markets. I mean, we keep talking about selling our weapons abroad. We know there's a huge market in Africa which is buying our weapons today. We know there is a market which is emerging in Southeast Asia. A lot of work is happening to that extent. How do you kind of see the involvement of international trade in terms of the access to the international markets with regards to Indian weapons, sir? Because as I said in the previous question, the if you're wanting the private sector to come in, they would obviously want to expand their business, because once they made a line, they would rather have larger numbers coming out, which probably would not be needed by the Indian Army or in the Air Force or the Navy itself. How do you kind of one, set it up, two, get the confidence within the international market, and three, begin the journey of exports?
yeah. Thank you, Adi. Again, a very important aspect you have brought out. You see, as far as international markets are concerned, whether India exports to international markets or the international OEMs look towards India for establishing defense manufacturing base, you have to ensure that the requisite infrastructure is in place and the environment is conducive to such joint ventures.
Hmm.
Now, the in the recent years, there have been several policy initiatives which have which are there so that the defense industrial ecosystem prospers. There was initiative like strategic partnership model, which was introduced in 2016 edition of the defense procurement procedure, and subsequently notified in May 2017. Now, this strategic partnership model envisages establishment of long-term strategic partnerships with Indian entities through a transparent and competitive process, wherein they would tie up with global original equipment manufacturers to seek technology transfers to set up domestic manufacturing infrastructure and supply chains. Now, this kind of initiative can give a big boost to the manufacturing infrastructure, that is manufacture of things like submarines, aircrafts, helicopters, and armored vehicles, so on and so forth. Then there are initiatives like IDEX, that is Ideas for Defense Excellence, which was launched in 2018 and also holds huge potential by integrating the startups, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, the R&D establishments, innovators, and academia in the defense ecosystem, while providing them grants or funding and other support. It has already manifested in some startling successes, including the 1,000 drone swarm display during the Republic Day 2022 and manufacture of very high resolution cameras. Another initiative is the setting up of defense industrial corridors. Two have already been set up in UP and Tamil Nadu. It was announced in 2018-19 with the aim to attract foreign investments up to rupees 20,000 crore by the year 2024-25, that is next year. Now, the respective state governments have also published defense and aerospace policies to attract investments already. Significant progress has been made. UPDIC has signed 108 memorandums of understanding with industry, with potential investments of about rupees 12,000 crore, out of which around 2,500 crore investments has already been realized. In the Tamil Nadu TNDIC, MOUs with 53 industries for potential investment of another rupees 12,000 crore approximately has been made, and investment of rupees 3,009 crore, 3,900 crore has already been realized. Perhaps maybe we can set up more such corridors, especially in industrialized states like Maharashtra and Gujarat. What is also of importance is that single window clearances are facilitated here. Licensing simplified. I believe the validity has already been increased from 3 to 15 years. Manufacturing of more parts delicensed, and regulatory mechanisms eased out. As per the Press Information Bureau release of May 2023, defense production has already crossed rupees 1 lakh crore mark for the first time ever last year in 2022-23. A number of policy reforms have been undertaken to achieve the objective of ease of doing business, including the integration of MSMEs and startups into the supply chains. There is almost a 200% increase in the number of defense licenses issued to the industry in the last 7-8 years. However, there is still a need for formation of a centralized agency to formulate, coordinate, and monitor the R&D and production of defense systems in India. I feel that the R&D and technology development today is fragmented, with defense forces making a wish list in the form of long-term perspective plans, that is LTPP, while the defense public sector undertakings, the DPSUs, frame the technology perspective capability roadmap, that is TPCR, and the DRDO makes the long-term integrated perspective plan, LTIPP, based on the services requirement. However, there is no single agency to coordinate and integrate all these plans. What we have is, maybe uh, biannual meetings for a couple of hours to kind of coordinate and approve the various initiatives, which is simply not good enough. I feel an institutionalized arrangement in the form of a central agency needs to be put in place, which should have members from services, DRDO, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Science and Technology, the public sector undertakings, the private industry, scientists, academia, and business chambers. And this institution should discuss the LTPP, the long term perspective plan
Okay.
of the services, threadbare, and a 5-year plan should then be formulated with firm budget and timelines. And this should not be, this should, correction, should be a continuous process, not restricted to sporadic meetings. Yeah.
The interesting thing is, of course, the continuity of effort is something I guess we need to look at, and that's something every time I think one of the drawbacks of India. Having said that, sir, we've done a lot of work in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of getting the transport corridors going. There is now bullet trains coming in. There are airports in every small town activated, and this and that. So that is a good environment, and we know for a fact that the last time the GE guys wanted to come into India in 2009, they had very clearly mentioned that we're not happy with the infrastructure and we will not be able to set up. So
Hmm.
obviously things have worked out, and there has been a change since 2009, and on the ground that is evidently visible. So infrastructure once, a second is of course the bureaucracy that and the red tape which actually comes into place. So in terms of ease, are there any steps that are being that you can see happening, or what would you kind of recommend, sir, with regards to the reduction of red tape and movement forward of kind of deals, manufacturing issues, and clearances, especially for these kind of projects, sir?
Yeah, Adi, as far as the bureaucracy and red tape is concerned, and there is, I think, sufficient progress being made in this regard. The latest, the procedure, it is now called Defense Acquisition Procedure, DAP 2020, which is an upgrade from the DPP 2016. And that is facilitating, setting up of defense industries, promoting the defense ecosystem. And it is also, promoting the export of military hardware to friendly foreign countries. Now, as you're aware, that defense exports provide military and diplomatic leverage and are an important source of revenue generation to support the internal requirements. This leverage is an important consideration for an emerging power like India to retain its edge in strategic sphere of influence. As of now, India is ranked within the top 25 countries in defense exports, but its share is actually abysmally low. So, what is happening is India is now steadily increasing its domestic defense manufacturing capabilities while simultaneously increasing exports of the hardware to
Hmm.
friendly foreign countries. In fact, since 2016-17, defense exports have already seen an almost tenfold impressive increase from rupees 1500 crores approximately to rupees 16,000 crores in 2022-23. Government has set a target of reaching defense exports of rupees 35,000 crore by 2024-25. Now, notable export deals include the supply of 155 mm artillery guns and Tivra 40 mm guns to the Indonesian Navy. There is also a $250 million contract for supply of Pinaka missiles to Armenia. India is also finalizing missile deals with Indonesia following the $375 million BrahMos missile agreement signed with Philippines last year. As part of foreign collaborations, India will be manufacturing aerostructures for Boeing's AH-64 Apache helicopters. There is also a deal with Airbus Defence and Space to produce C-295 medium lift transport aircraft. During the recent visit of the Prime Minister to United States, there was an announcement of procuring 31 Predator 9QB drones, which is accompanied by establishment of a global MRO setup in India, which of course will be a harbinger of exports in future. In fact, I would consider the arms deals in international market to be an important indicator to the degree of self-reliance a nation has achieved in the realm of defense. As of now, there is no reliable way to determine the overall degree of indigenization in defense, since each indigenously manufactured system may have a number of imported components. I feel a simpler way to determine the index of Atmanirbharta in defense could simply be the ratio between the export and import of defense equipment. Just to illustrate, the Indian arms exports last year in 2022-23 were 15,920 crores, while imports were rupees 40,840 crores as per the Honorable Minister of State for Defense. However, the figure is to be extrapolated from the CIPRI report of global arms trade, which is reportedly $112 billion, and India's share given as 11%. The import would be to the order of rupees 100 lakh crore. Depending upon which figure is taken, the Atmanirbharta index would be between 0.16 and 0.39. Of course, it is set to improve in future due to emphasis on local manufacture and exports. So the point I'm trying to bring out is that the Atmanirbharta policy, self-reliance, the focus on exports, all these are leading to a lot of unshackling of bureaucratic red tape, and in future we are likely to see the exports going up and the self-reliance index also going up. Yeah,
It's also the mindset, sir, and that's probably the last thing that I would like to ask you. Traditionally in India, the talk of arms sales and arm deals are frowned upon. People don't look at it very. It's not supposed to be a very
yeah,
respectful career, respectful profession, respectful this thing. How do you change that mindset? Because you're not talking about just run of the mill stuff. You're talking about stuff which is high tech. It's going to actually revolutionize. For example, aviation technology will revolutionize domestic air travel. At the end of it, that's something which needs to be understood, and you can actually do your surveillance systems will revolutionize whole lot of other setups, your
yeah,
GPS and this and that and a whole lot of things. How do you kind of put that mindset away, sir, and induce uh, the factor that yeah, this is a respectable job, this is a respectable this thing, and it's critical for the growth of the country. So how do you kind of get to that?
yeah. Yeah, Adi, I'm glad that you asked me this query, because no amount of R&D or policy focus would lead to desired outcomes unless there is a significant change in mindset. I like to illustrate with two examples. Project Arjun for indigenous armored fighting vehicle was conceived in 1972, and DRDO was accordingly tasked in 1974. Designed by CVRD, which is a DRDO agency, was finalized between 1983 and 1996. The production began in 2009 with a 1400 horsepower German MTU engine and rank transmission. Although the top speed of this Arjun tank was high, 72 km per hour, its weight had burgeoned to an unwieldy 62 tons. There were operational issues, and Army ordered only two regiments. Mark II version added ERA panels and the weight increased further to 67 tons. The design and development period took so long that the final product, even with imported content, had issues. Due to economies of scale not kicking in, the spares backup and thus maintenance of the limited inventory has also become a problem. The next case study is that of a light combat aircraft, the LCA program, which started in the 1980s with Aeronautical Development Establishment, that is ADE, tasked to design a single engine, light multi role fighter aircraft to replace the MiG 21s. Hindustan Aeronautics Limited was to manufacture it, and Kaveri gas turbine engine was to power this LCA, termed Tejas. And GTRE, that is Gas Turbine Research Establishment, was tasked for developing this 10,000 kg thrust engine called Kaveri, a very complex technology requiring prowess in metallurgy of the highest order because of the extremely high temperatures involved. Not unexpectedly, I would say, the Kaveri engine failed in technical requirements and was delinked from the project in year 2008. LCA Tejas then took on board the imported G404 engine, and the initial clearance for the flight was given in 2011, final clearance given in 2019. And now, during the Prime Minister's recent visit to the US, there is a GHL deal for G414 jet engine, which will power LCA Tejas, the Generation 5 fighter jet. So, what does it tell you about the mindsets and the lessons learned? Firstly, the planners for any futuristic weapon system platform must refrain from formulating an eclectic mix of qualitative requirements. Well, best of everything: top speed, top torque, top maneuverability, best maneuver capability, fire and move, surveillance capability, best in everything. Perhaps there is no weapon system or equipment in the world which is best in class in all possible parameters. Thus, the focus should be an optimal mix of technical specifications, which will give a realistic design challenge to the developing agency. Because best of everything, an engineer knows there is a trade-off in most of these parameters. So if you have best in one particular parameter, you will not land up with the very best in the linked parameter. So the focus, as I said, has to be on optimality. Next, the developing agency or a composite expert body, which I had suggested a little earlier also, this developing agency should carry out a SWOT analysis of the challenges in design and manufacture. Technologies where adequate indigenous capability is not available or which require Large capital investments and time should not be targeted for local manufacture. Instead, joint ventures with foreign OEMs for the same should be encouraged, with outright import being the last and the least preferred option, of course. It should be understood that no nation can ever be 100% self reliant in all the state of the art technologies. With the rapidly changing operational landscape and disruptive technologies, please note that only 5 countries in the world produce jet engines as of today.
Hmm.
Sukhoi 30 Mark 1, manufactured by HL under license, as I brought out earlier, has systems and components supplied by 14 manufacturers in 6 nations. Many manufacturing challenges become insurmountable if adequate know how and prowess in metallurgical engineering is not there. And this is one area which requires tremendous capital investment. Even if technological capability is there, but economies of scale are not favorable, it is better to join global supply chains. The earlier, the better. And this is an important mindset which has to be ingrained. Private sector has to be encouraged and provided a level playing field. No doubts about that. The transfers of technology available with public sector undertakings should be transferred free of cost to private sector manufacturers. Hand holding by the government, especially for micro, small, and medium enterprises, is imperative. Unlike this future infantry combat vehicle FICV program, which was started in 2006 and closed 15 years later, the private industry would have absorbed losses in this FICV program. But imagine the condition of the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Some of them would have been devastated. This should not happen again. So we have to develop a mindset wherein we collaborate, don't compete, handhold the private sector, especially the micro, small, and medium enterprises, draw up realistic qualitative requirements, qualitative parameters, look at things which we can do indigenously, what appears beyond our capability, enter into joint ventures with foreign OEMs, and join global supply chains. Yeah,
Sir, I think you've covered the subject really on a very all round basis, and I'd like to thank you because one of the things in India that we notice is that we have this whole enthusiasm in the beginning, and it kind of dies out as time goes by. I just hope that we don't land up in that sort of a situation, and this enthusiasm basically converts to a role, and which converts to actual results on the ground, because this is the need of the hour. For one to be a superpower is not just or a great power in the world is not just the economics, it's also the military which protect your economics. So thank you so much. Manufacturing is something, I think, a little, as you mentioned initially, elusive to the country, and we need to focus towards getting it right, going forward in the future. At the end of it, that is something that the defense and the country demands for us to achieve. Once again, sir, thank you so much for appearing on my show, and I'm looking forward for many such intellectual conversations with you in the future.
thank you, Adi. It has been pleasure interacting with you, and hope we will collaborate in future also. And Jai Hind to all the viewers.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you.